Om Agnanatimirandasya Gnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Staptitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakambalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Haripriye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Krupa Sindhobhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasa Adi Gaura Bhaktarunda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Narayanam Namaskrityam Naran Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udhirayet Nashtaprayesho Bhadresho Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtike Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangom Langaite Girim Yatkrupatamaham Vande Shri Gurum Dinatharinam. I offer my respectful obeisances onto my spiritual master, the deliverer of the fallen souls. His mercy turns the dumb into eloquent speakers and enables the lame to cross the mountains. Today we are reading from second canto, the Cosmic Manifestation, chapter 10. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions, and verse number 9. Ekam ekatra bhave yada na upalambe Traityam tatra yo veda sa atma swa ashraya. Ekam, one, ekatra, another, abhave, in the absence of, yada, because, na, does not, upalambe, perceptible, trityam, in three stages, tatra, there, yaha, the one, veda, who knows, saha, he, atma, the super soul, swa, own, ashraya, shelter, ashraya, of the shelter. Translation by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All three of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one another, it is not understood. But the Supreme Being who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter is interdependent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter. Purport by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. There are innumerable living entities, one dependent on the other in the relationship of the controlled and the controller. But without the medium of perception, no one can know or understand who is the controller and who is the controlled and who is the controller. For example, the sun controls the power of our vision. We can see the sun because the sun has its body, and the sunlight is useful only because we have eyes. Without our having eyes, the sunlight is useless, and without sunlight, the eyes are useless. Thus, they are interdependent, and none of them is independent. Therefore, the natural question arises concerning who made them interdependent. The one who has made such a relationship of interdependence must be ultimately completely independent. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the ultimate source of interdependence, of interdependent objectives, is the completely independent subject. This ultimate source of all interdependence is the Supreme Truth or Paramatma, the Super Soul, who is not dependent on anything else. He is Swa Ashraya Ashraya. He is only dependent on his self, and thus he is the supreme shelter of everything. Although Paramatma and Brahma are subordinate to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is Purushottama or the supreme or the super person, he is the source of the super soul also. In the Bhagavad Gita 15.18, Lord Krishna says that he is the Purushottama and the source of everything. And thus it is concluded that Sri Krishna is the ultimate source and shelter of all entities, including the super soul and the supreme Brahman. Even accepting that there is no difference between the super soul and the individual soul is dependent on the super soul for being liberated from the illusion of material energy. The individual is under the clutches of illusory energy, and therefore, although qualitatively one with the super soul, he is under the illusion of identifying himself with matter. And to get out of this illusory concept of factual life, the individual soul has to depend on the super soul to be recognized as one with him. In that sense, also the super soul is a supreme shelter, and there is no doubt about it. The individual living entity, the jiva, is always dependent on the super soul, Paramatma, because the individual soul forgets his spiritual identity, whereas the super soul, Paramatma, does not forget his transcendental position. In the Bhagavad Gita, these separate positions of Jivatma and Paramatma are specifically mentioned. In the 4th chapter, Arjuna, the Jiva soul, is represented as forgetful of his many previous births, but the Lord, the super soul, is not forgetful. The Lord even remembers when he taught the Bhagavad Gita to the sun god some billions of years before. The Lord can remember such millions and billions of years, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 7.26 as follows. Vedaham samatittanti vartamanani cha arjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mam tu veda na kaschan. The Lord, in his eternal blissful body of knowledge, is fully aware of all that happened in the past, that which is going on at present, and all that will happen in the future. But in spite of his being the shelter of both the Paramatma and Brahman, persons with the poor fund of knowledge are unable to understand him as he is. The propaganda of the identity of cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual entities is completely misleading, because even such a person or individual soul as Arjuna could not remember his past deeds, although he is always with the Lord. And what can the tiny ordinary man falsely claiming to be one with the cosmic consciousness know about his past, present, and future? So this is a pretty long purport by Prabhupada, but also very impactful. There is a I don't know, each one of Srila Prabhupada's purports are like this, very profound and having so much impact. This chapter is all about, it starts with Sukadeva Goswami wanting to, talk about creation and also answer how Bhagavatam is the answer to all the questions. That is because in the previous chapter, Parikshit Maharaj had asked some probing questions about creation and all this other stuff. This particular verse is very difficult to understand if we don't understand the previous verse. Previous verse number 8. I will read the translation. The individual person possessing different instruments of senses is called the Adhyatmic person, and the individual controlling deity of the senses is called the Adidaivic. The embodiment seen on the eyeballs is called the Adibhautik person. So what is happening here is, in this particular text, the individual living entity has been classified into 3 different categories. One is called the Adhyatmic, and then the other one is the Adi Daivik, and the third one is the Adi Bhautik. We'll dig a little deeper into it so that we get the context of what we are talking. All the controlling deities like Vishnu, Brahma, and Shiva are different manifestations of Paramatma feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, who exhibits himself in such manners by entering into each and every universe generated from him. But still, apparently, there are divisions of control and control, the controller and the controlled. We have our senses, but the senses are controlled by the superior controlling deities, which we just now read. We cannot see without light, and the supreme controller of light is the sun. The sun god is the sun planet, and we, the individual human beings, or any other being on the earth, are all controlled by the sun god as far as our eyes are concerned. Similarly, all the senses we have are controlled by the superior demigods, who are also as such living entities as we are. But one is empowered while the other is controlled. So this is the difference we need to understand. The controlled living entity is called the Adhyatmic person. So we are all Adhyatmic. And the controller is called the Adidaivic person. So all the demigods are the Adidaivics. Any individual living being can become the sun god, or even Brahma, or any other god in the upper planetary systems by the higher grade of pious work. And similarly, one becomes controlled by the higher demigods by the lower grades of fruitive activities. So every individual living entity is subject to the supreme control of Paramatma, who puts everyone in different positions of controller and controlled. So if you look at it, we have seen different types of, organization of the universe, how it was created and how it descended. That was one sort of organization that we saw. Here, there is another type of organization that is being presented to us, which is the controlled and the controller. So the living entities are Adi Bhaut. Sorry, one second. I'm getting mixed up with these words. So Adi Bhautik. All the living entities are Adi Bhautik, and we are controlled by the demigods. Demigods are somewhat in the middle layer. They control us, but they are also being controlled. And finally, who is the supreme controller? The supreme controller is Paramatma himself. So this is the background in which we need to understand text 9. So let us reread the translation of text 9. All three of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But Supreme Being, who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter, is independent of all, and therefore he is the supreme shelter. So here, using the previous verse, truth is being established that Purushottama, Lord Krishna, he is the supreme shelter, and every other person who takes shelter of others are all depending on the Supreme Lord. And the Supreme Lord himself doesn't take shelter in anyone else other than himself. The example that Prabhupada is now giving is, the sun controls the power of our vision. We can see the sun because the sun has its body, and sunlight is useful only because we have eyes. Without our having eyes, the sun is useless, and without sunlight, the eyes are useless. Thus, we are interdependent. So we are dependent on the sun, and the sun itself is dependent, or the sun god himself is dependent on us. If you are not going to use his energies to see, to produce, then the sun god and his powers are useless. So there is this relation that has been established between the sun god and the living entities. And what Prabhupada is directly pointing to is the one who has made such a relationship of interdependence must ultimately be completely independent. So who can make this sort of a relationship? It's only the supreme independent person who can make this sort of a relationship. Because Sun God is not an ordinary individual, he's not an ordinary entity. He's very, very powerful when compared to us. Even though he's very, very powerful, if you look at the universe, there are millions and billions, unlimited number of sun planets, and each one of them is presided by one sun god. And there are innumerable living entities in each of those universe depending on the sun god. So the Supreme Lord whom we are talking about is so much more, powerful, opulent, and he is also independent because he can create all of this and maintain all of this. That is the essence. The ultimate source of all interdependence is the supreme truth or Paramatma. Again, this particular supreme truth or Krishna or the Paramatma, we call him in different names. We probably are representing different viewpoints or philosophies, but he's still the same, the one, the super soul who is not dependent on anything else. He is Swa Ashraya Ashraya. He is only dependent on his self, and thus is the supreme shelter of everything. So now this word, Swa Ashraya Ashraya, catches my imagination. It's captive actually. All through my life, I've heard this word self-made. Oh, I am a self-made person. There's so much ego in it. So much, we feel so accomplished. But if you look at all of these statements of I am self-made, nobody helped me, blah, 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 all of this. And if you really look at it, every one of us, or somehow or the other, leveraging what has been either given to us by the society at some level or the other, and then we are also depending on the demigods and even the Supreme Lord. Without all of that, I cannot be made. Forget about self-made. So here the key is Swa Ashraya Ashraya is the person who is self-made. And who is this? This is the Supreme Lord. Nobody else can be self-made. Nobody else can be self-taught. Nobody else can be, standing on their own legs. Everything that we have and everything that we stand on and everything that we build and everything that we achieve is all because we have dependence on the demigods and the Supreme Lord. If you can understand that even the demigods depend on the Supreme Lord, I think that is the ultimate. That is the knowledge that we all have to realize and we have to go. The individual is under the clutches of illusory energy, and therefore, although qualitatively one with the Supreme Soul, he is under the illusion of identifying himself with the matter. So this is another big issue. If you, take the other point of view, there is this illusion that the individual soul is identical with the matter. I consider myself to be this body. And that is why I have so much of attachment, not only to my body, but everything that I have worked for and have accumulated, and I'm planning to work for and accumulate more, and in the future, so much more. All of this, that is because of the illusion. And to get out of this illusory conception of factual life, the individual soul has to depend on the super soul to recognize as one with him. In that sense, the super soul is the supreme shelter, and there is no doubt about it. So Prabhupada is now putting forth this other point. Yes, we are, in the category, or we are the same with the super soul when it comes to the divisions of, Jivatma and Paramatma. However, we cannot achieve it unless we are given shelter by the Supreme Lord. The individual living entity, the Jiva, is always dependent on the super soul, Paramatma, because he is the individual. Because the individual soul forgets his spiritual identity, whereas the super soul Paramatma does not forget his transcendental position. So this is the other thing. We as individual souls or entities, we have this fault of forgetting. We don't have memory. Whatever memory we have is what is given or permitted by Paramatma. Whereas Paramatma, or even the Supreme Soul Bhagavan, he has unlimited memory. He doesn't forget. He doesn't change bodies. He always remembers his position as well as every single activity that is happening, that has happened and will happen. So that way, he is still the supreme, and he's the one who can provide us the shelter. In the fourth chapter, Arjuna, the Jiva soul, is represented as forgetful of his many, many previous births. And the Lord, the super soul, is not forgetful. Again, it's the same example, Prabhupada is giving. And Prabhupada is also quoting from 7.26 Bhagavad Gita, where, Krishna himself is saying, I remember billions of years ago, I had given the same subject of Bhagavad Gita to the sun god. And in the march of time, it has been forgotten. So the Lord, in his eternal blissful body of knowledge, is fully aware of all that has happened in the past, that which is going on at the present, and also what will happen in the future. We hear this many times in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna tells Arjuna very clearly, Arjuna, it is your choice to be my instrument. You can be willingly my instrument, even otherwise. What has to happen has been destined. I've already decided. I've already killed all these great warriors of yours. I've already killed all these great, your loving relatives that whom you're paining for so much. So it's up to you to choose to be my, instrument, or you can, not be my instrument. It's up to you. He gives that free will to Arjuna. But again, Arjuna, what he does, he takes shelter of the Lord. So the propaganda of the identity of the cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual living entities is completely misleading, because even such persons or individual souls as Arjuna could not remember the past deeds. And this is something very important. I met some of my nephews and Chandramukhi's nephews when I was in India, and even here with the young, they all talk about this cosmic consciousness, the universe. I want to be one with the universe, but that is misleading. You cannot be one with the universe or with the cosmic consciousness. There is only one Bhagavan, and this Bhagavan is the one whom we need to take shelter of. Without taking shelter of the right person, what we'll do is we'll end up, like Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita so many places, if we take shelter of the demigods, then we go to the demigod planets. If we take shelter of demons, we go to the planets of the demons. If we take shelter of ghouls and ghosts, then we'll be born to live among them. And if we take shelter of living entities, we will be born among living entities. So we need to be wise and choose properly and understand who is the shelter of all shelters. He is Purushottama. And I will stop there. Please forgive me if I have committed any mistakes. If you have any discussions or questions, please bring it up. I will try to the best of my ability. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisance. All glories to Guru Maharaj Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you, Mataji. Please accept my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Very, very, and very wonderful class, Prabhu. Especially you put this verse in the background of the previous verse. That was very nice, And I just, my mind was just dwelling on two things when you were going through this. One is the sun, the influence of the sun, and to think that each and every leaf on a plant or a giant tree, it has something. It is always doing something with the sunlight. Right? And then without the sun, our eyes are useless. And without our eyes, the sun is useless for us. That kind of dependence. Amazing. The other picture that came to my mind was the picture of Gomata, where all the parts of the cow's body is, we have picture of that deity, relating to that one. So we call this instrument of the human body, but it is somewhere else in Bhagavatam it says some 36,000 demigods or angels are controlling our activities, and so imagine what a controlled instrument it is, and we are still thinking that we are independent, and the Lord has placed us in such an interdependence to the demigods. And this body is fully, actually it's a divine instrument when we think of it, I mean, just so limitedly my thoughts. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Wonderful class. Wonderful class.
Thank you so much, Mataji. You're right, Mataji. This body, we are so familiar with it that we don't look at it, with the proper perspective that we should look at. It is divine, like you said, it is a divine instrument given by the Lord. It's basically, I think it's in the last or I don't know, 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where, Krishna actually describes the mind, the soul sits on the mind and even this body as if it's an instrument, and we actually travel in time to achieve whatever we want. So yes, Mataji, you're right, and if we realize that and we start using it in the right direction, it will be so useful. This is particularly for myself. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam, Radha Kunjabihari, Prabhu. Nice class. You and Sandhya Mataji, they're all realized. At least you can understand what Sandhya Mataji is telling. I am not there yet. So for me, I'm thinking, individual soul and super soul. I think there is in the purport you said, individual soul doesn't understand there is a super soul in the heart. So first of all, sometimes we feel that I'm still the body, and where is the point of understanding the individual soul and then the super soul? That consciousness of moods based on the mode of mental nature, it's bombarding us. Maybe sometimes we remember, sometimes we don't, and sometimes we come to the completely bodily platform. It's a wavering, right? Of course, with the association. But how do you stick into understand that, stick into a consciousness that we can understand that super soul is there in the heart, is always watching us. CCTV camera is there, don't worry. We are putting all the other cameras in the house, but we forget there is a CCTV inside. So what's your realization on that, Prabhu?
So nice. Whatever you said is very true to me also. The best instrument to remember that we have, our position and realize what is the position of the Lord is, we all have this Bhagavatam set in our home. And if we don't have, I think we should all, I know you have one, so I shouldn't be preaching to anyone here. We should all get this Srimad Bhagavatam and make it a habit to open it at least once in a day and then go through some verses, and I know everyone here does that. So that is the only way, Prabhuji. And as long as we do it, at some point of time, at least I am hoping by the blessings of all of you, at some point of time, I will be able to realize what I spoke. Hare Krishna, Shivalabhur Prabhu. I see that you have unmuted your mic. Please go ahead, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. No, I completely agree with the wonderful points that Sandhya Mataji brought up, Balaram Prasad brought up, and of course the way you've connected everything so nicely. Just a few things. Maybe I can start or attempt with to first address Balaram Prasad Prabhu's question about what my thoughts and realizations, at least based on what I've learned so far. Best way to remember is through the association, through chanting, and of course all the devotional processes that we all are engaged in, right? So continue doing that. But a prime example that comes to mind is how even Srimati Radharani and all the gopis, they were constantly remembering Krishna. And how were they doing that? By their association. Within their association, they were thinking of Krishna, sitting here playing the flute, so, standing there under the tree, tending to the calves and cows. They were, and here's how he would dress, and here's how the garland would look on him. They were constantly thinking about him and sharing those experiences with each other. And in that association of devotees, what happens? You automatically remember, and that way
Yeah.
you're constantly thinking of Krishna. So that's an example that comes to my mind, and that's why the importance of the association of devotees is so important. And of course, that goes along with proper chanting and proper performance of our devotional activities as well. So reading and all of that. So that's one way, I feel, we can be, it's an easy way, right? We don't have to work too hard. It's not an uphill task. It's just getting, even if you're in the lowest of the moods and the worst of the day, being in the association of devotees and devotees who are so inspired, that can be infectious, right? It can just get to you, and your moods will go up, your thoughts will change, your whole frame of mind will change, and you'll be in the association of devotees thinking about Krishna. So it would become easier to remember, easier, less difficult, I would say, for us. The second part is the way, the importance of cosmic consciousness. I mean, it's a crazy topic. I mean, that's something that if you haven't jumped into it, or you haven't touched it or delved into it, you're most fortunate. Because if you go into even the World Wide Web, for that matter, I mean, you'll go crazy, because you'll have people, you have these modern day thinkers who have their own interpretations of what cosmic consciousness is all about. Some will describe it as a mystical experience. Some will describe it as being, transcending. Some will describe it as merging into, that's the worst part, where they're talking about how you can actually merge into that consciousness. And some will talk about how you can find it only within yourself, and you have to become self-aware, and they take it through several levels of maturity before you can actually transcend and figure out that you're not this body. But they will never go to the extent of saying there is the supreme personality that is in complete consciousness, right? They will never attribute it to that one single personality. In our case, as we know it, is Krishna. But that they will never accept. And the focus is always on, inward. So they will give you various examples also, for that matter. They will tell you this person, that person, this is how they, achieved that stage of cosmic consciousness, which is completely, very, I mean, I'm not saying it is false, but at the same time, it's only partially true to a certain extent, because they're never really addressing the personal form, the qualities, the pastimes of Krishna, right? It's all about, being able to look inward and being able to transcend, which is only a partial manifestation. Yes, Krishna and the Paramatma feature is there, but it is only a partial manifestation. Beyond that, there is so much more, right? The Bhagavan feature is completely missing in any of their interpretations. We are so fortunate, therefore, reading the Srimad Bhagavatam, because it's giving us all that knowledge. Because only through that knowledge can we make the progress that we need to, in a much faster, easier way, more effective way. So I just wanted to thank you again for talking about how all of these things are so important. The dependence is so important, that understanding our constitutional position, right? The Swarupa Vyavasthiti, that is so important. Understanding who we are and how important that dependence is. If we don't have that concept, we are lost. We will listen, we will hear all these things from these modern day thinkers and think that's the way to do it. But we're so fortunate that we have the Srimad Bhagavatam that gives us all this knowledge. So thank you again, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you for bringing that, bird's eye view of the cosmic consciousness thing. I know it is very infectious if we touch it. That's one of the reasons I think we are told not to just delve into whatever subjects that is available. So you're right. Very easily we can also get poisoned and get drawn into those. Again, some of them are pretenders, and some of them may have no experience, no lineage, no proof, but yet it gets propagated because it is easy to consume. And one of the reasons why they don't want to identify a supreme person behind, I believe, is it is envy. It's okay to have somebody anonymous, but it's not okay to have somebody known. The moment you know somebody, then, oh, I'm better than him comes into play. So I think that is the reason why they all like that. They falsely say nirguna and all those things.
Right.
Again, Prabhupada has defeated that nirguna so many times, saying nirguna doesn't mean there is no form, it means there is no material form. So I think it's envy where they want to keep the supreme consciousness to be anonymous. So
Correct. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then the whole concept of the self-made that you spoke about comes crashing down the moment you accept that there is a supreme personality behind the cosmic consciousness.
Yeah, Prabhuji, even otherwise it is not true, because we are leveraging something that already exists. So how are we self-made?
True.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So nice.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhus. Maybe I'm interested in this cosmic consciousness. Can you send some reference?
Prabhuji. Okay. I don't have any references, Prabhuji.
Read the Bhagavatam. Just read the Bhagavatam. You will get all the knowledge you need about cosmic consciousness. That's all we need.
Okay.
Prabhu, I actually, what I was thinking, we are in the ISKCON, Naperville, with this closed circuit of devotees talking to each other in the seva of Krishna. If you just get out of this, just for a couple days, we will realize what's going on in the world. Honestly, we may even not even chant our rounds. We may not even think about Krishna. We may not even think about Srimad Bhagavatam. That's I was talking to Sandhya Mataji, and she said the same thing. It's not an easy fact. So the bondage is association. No doubt about it. That's the key. We don't realize that. If you just get out for a few days on your own and go, then we know what's the world is.
Very, very true. And I can relate to that.
Thank you, Prabhu, for bringing up. It's really a test. Just when because of my recent experience staying away from here, oh my Krishna, it really makes such a difference.
Totally agree, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu and Matajis. It's almost 10. Somebody wanted to speak? If not, I have to run. I have another meeting in another 15 minutes. So thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpatarubhyasya kripa sindhobhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo ananta. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.